see right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboys fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready.
I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face.
Oh, I'm from Brooklyn.
Hey, guess any.
You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host, Keith Angle, on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talk right here on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. We're live on Zodiac today. You can catch us on Facebook. You can catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on, as always, on all the podcast channels you can think of, iHeartRadio, Spotify. Too many to name, guys. We're growing and growing and growing. Listen, I want to, by the way, East Greenbush, and I know some of you hate my weather report, but I'll tell you today, East Greenbush, New York's a little soupy this morning. It's getting a little humid. We're going to go from about 49 degrees last week to 90, 93 this week. So Mother Nature continues to play practical jokes on us right and left, but it is a great Northeast. So this is what we should expect. Guys, thanks for joining me today. I want to thank all you guys who will be in the room live. Well, everybody who will watch this later, all the groups that allow me to share it. I want to thank my guest from last week, Andre Lacroix, former NHL and WHA player, leading scorer in WHA history. We had a great conversation. Great guy. Please get his book. The second snowstorm, my life on and off the ice. Great book. Speaking of books, today my guest will be Pete Croatto. I keep asking Pete if I'm saying his name correctly. I certainly hope I am. That's 2 weeks in a row I've had to do that before or after I started the show. I hate that. But Pete is the author of From Hang Time to Prime Time, Business, Entertainment, and the Birth of the Modern NBA. He's everything from, well, I think some of the reviews I read were talking about covering the NBA from 79 to 89. It does cover it before that a bit, obviously, because it's the NBA-ABA merger, which really is of interest to me. I actually liked the ABA when I was a young man. But we're going to talk about all of that and more with Pete Croatto, and we'll bring Pete in right now if I can find the right button. Hello, Pete. How are you?
Yeah, good, Keith. How are you this morning?
Excellent. Great to have you on. I know you're from not too far from me, just a few hours down in Ithaca, right?
Yeah. I'm actually, I'm in just outside of Ithaca, and actually I grew up in the Northeast. I grew up in central New Jersey. So Monmouth County. So Monmouth County, then moved to Middlesex and Somerset. All the other glamour burbs of New Jersey. So yeah, I know the Northeast pretty well. Excellent.
How long you been in Ithaca?
About 6 years. My wife actually got a job teaching at Ithaca College in 2015. So we moved up here, I should say. Right. Well, actually about a month. Be 6 years next month.
Excellent. Well, before we dive into the book, let's tell us a little bit about Pete Croatto. And it's Croatto. I am saying that right?
Croatto. Yeah, you're. I think that sounds right. It's still a little early for me. So yeah, I'll do that.
I graduated from Perth Central High School here in Fulton County, New York, with a probably like 50th in a class of 53.
You still remember your ranking? Wow.
It's not hard when there's only 53.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
It was a little higher than that, but I like to joke around about that. Tell us a little bit about Pete Croatto and how'd you get to the point that we're chatting today about this book? What brought you here?
Oh man. I don't know. I mean, depends on your viewers, listeners. Do you want the long version or the abridged version?
We want to get into the book, so we probably shouldn't do the one that'll get made into a movie.
I'll cut out the Titanic version. No, I've been a sports fan since I was like 7 or 8, and I was also very lucky that I grew up in a house that with two two frantic readers. My mom, my dad, they love books. They love reading. They were still to this day. I mean, if you go to my parents' house in Central Jersey, where they still live,
Yeah.
it is lined with books. And I was very lucky to grow up in that environment, but also have a man in my life, my Little League baseball coach, Joe Zielski, who was, taught me pretty much everything I know about how to play the game, how to play baseball, football, basketball, but also got me into the history of those sports and also into what made those sports enjoyable and fun. So, the book is pretty much the merging, I should say, of those two backgrounds. And yeah, I mean, I became a sports writer later in my writing career. I've been a writer I've written professionally since 1998. I've been a sports writer since, I guess you call me a sports writer, since officially 2013 when I started freelance. So yeah, that's why I'm here. I think the book is sort of the culmination of a few things. And I guess people say, oh, I'm a sports writer. Yeah, I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, but I'm only a recent sports writer, and only because as a freelance writer, I get I have the ability to choose what I want to write about.
Yeah, and you've obviously gotten stuff published in some pretty significant publications as well. The New York Times, SI.com, a couple come to mind. Grantland comes to mind. Is Grantland still, is that still up and running?
No, Grantland folded in 2015, and now it's Bill and his cohorts, Grantland, they formed the Ringer, I think, in 2016. The Ringer just celebrated its 5th year anniversary.
It's a great publication. I really like that publication.
I love the Ringer. I love Grantland was terrific. Yeah, what I like about the Ringer is it's proof that you can have a website that embraces audio, visual, and written word. I always hate when this has happened a few years ago when outlets were like, oh, we're going to pivot toward video, and it's like, you can have both. You don't have to have one or the other. Yeah.
Well, let's get into the book. I mean, why this book? I mean, you're I'm going to say you're a younger man than I am. I'll be 61 here in a little bit. And I grew up during the age that you start writing this book, coming of age. And I was actually an ABA. I like the ABA. I'm a Knick fan, but I actually had this, was very enamored with the ABA as I was growing up. So I was very interested at the beginning of this book, obviously, and throughout. But why this book for Pete Croatto?
Yeah, I'm 43. So I grew up watching the NBA, or I became an NBA fan, I should say, in the early 1990s, specifically with those great Knicks teams coached by Pat Riley that had Patrick Ewing and John Starks. But it's funny, I talked before about how, growing up in a house where my parents read a lot, and reading was how I got to become a sports fan, because I'd read the sports pages every day. I would read, when I was into baseball, I read every baseball book I could get my hand on. And when I became a basketball fan, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
And when I started to read basketball books, the books that are about the 70s and the 80s, there are a lot of great books that deal with specific players or maybe specific actions. For example, Loose Balls, Terry Pluto's great book on the ABA.
Yeah. Great, very good book.
Great book. Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan. They've all written books. They've all either written books or had great books written about them. And it's funny, as I got older and read more books about the NBA, there would always be references to the NBA's dark ages, or the NBA, the finals were on tape delay, or the finals were, there was a drug problem, and I couldn't really find a book, or I didn't really uncover a book that that talked about the 70s and early 80s. There were newspaper articles and magazines that maybe that talked about certain things, but nothing that I could find in a library or at a Barnes and Noble. Yeah. And when I got of age, I thought, there really isn't a book that talks about those ages between the glory days of Wilt and Russell, and maybe the 1990s of Jordan and Bird, there wasn't really that sweet spot. And I wanted to write more about how the NBA became the NBA, this giant entertainment and corporate behemoth. And so, when the opportunity came up to write this book, I tried to really sink my teeth into it.
Well, here is the book, by the way. I meant to show it a minute ago. So this is From Hang Time to Prime Time, Business, Entertainment, and the Birth of the Modern NBA by Pete Croatto. It's published by Simon & Schuster. You can find it pretty much everywhere, Ray. I mean, I saw it on Amazon as I was looking for some stuff. Reviews.
That's the one thing that always tickles me is my first book, and I'm more than tickled to have it like be in major bookstores and Amazon and Books A Million, and that is, I don't think it's ever going to cease being surreal to me. So I mean, it's funny. It was also in people keep sending me photos of the book in their library or the bookstore, and it's that never gets old.
Yeah, some tremendous reviews I read last night. I was looking at Amazon and looking at some other places, and I mean, all the reviews are glowing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Let's dive in a little bit. So your book pretty much starts, as you said, and the NBA. And I had this conversation with somebody recently about the NBA, about the time you start to write. The mid '70s, right about this book starts, I should say, with Walter Kennedy as the commissioner. The teams, the league is in trouble. I mean, the arenas are half empty. Teams are close to folding, or they're moving all over the place. The ABA was obviously helping drive up salaries and whatnot. And then Larry O'Brien becomes the commissioner, and things start to change. Talk about the change and why the change was necessary from Walter Kennedy to Larry O'Brien, and the whole ABA impact. Yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up. To me, I think Larry O'Brien is probably the most overlooked.
I agree.
Figure in NBA history, and it's with good reason, because he was first appointed he first took on the commissioner job in 1975. I mean, that's 46 years ago. I mean, that isn't a lifetime ago. In modern media, that is several ages ago. I mean, we move so quickly now. So to me, Larry O'Brien is very important for a couple of reasons. First is that he brought legitimacy to the NBA. The NBA at that time wasn't the league that it is now. It wasn't a league that got a lot of attention. It wasn't a league that had a lot of glitz and glamour. I mean, there were great players, and again, I can know them as well as I do. But the NBA had a legitimacy problem. It needed to be. It wasn't a big business the way that baseball was, the NFL was. Yeah. So with Larry O'Brien, his hiring was so important, because here was somebody who was a major figure. I mean, people forget Larry O'Brien was on the cover of Time magazine. He was part of JFK's Irish Mafia. He was part of LBJ's cabinet. He was a member of John F. Kennedy's inner circle at the White House. So
he was on the wrong side of Watergate too.
Exactly. Yeah, he was. His office was burgled.
Right. He's a big figure who didn't really have anything to do with Watergate, right?
Exactly. So, but he was an important figure. And the NBA needed to have that headline grabbing event or person that made it signify business. And the other thing too with Walter Kennedy was that he was a nice man, and people liked Walter Kennedy, but he was getting older. He was in his 60s, which at that time, and he was he had a long life back in the 70s. But he was he was tired. The owners were starting to get to him. He kind of had affiliation with the big city owners, and Larry O'Brien was somebody who came in who didn't really have those allegiances. He wasn't an NBA guy. He wasn't part of that fabric. He was an outsider, and he was able to come in and just sort of get down to business, which is what the NBA needed. The owners were figures that were owners. The NBA owners were people that were just They couldn't have a meeting without an argument breaking out. And Larry O'Brien was a guy who's just used to compromise and used to getting deals done. So not only was Larry O'Brien he lend that air of legitimacy and organization to the NBA, which it badly needed. But he also hired David Stern, the future NBA commissioner, full time in 1978, and made him his protege. So those two things alone were invaluable to the NBA going forward. As for the ABA, what it did more than anything else was it brought in an infusion of young talent and also a style of play that galvanized the NBA and made it exciting. Because the NBA in the 70s was very much a back to the basket, low post kind of league. And I know a lot of people now miss that kind of basketball. I miss it a little bit, but it wasn't an exciting brand of basketball. So you have the ABA coming with the ABA dissolving into the ABA, you have a influx of great, exciting young players, George Gervin, David Thompson, Julius Erving, on and on and on. And those players set the tone for the next, for the game now. A very fast break oriented, offense oriented kind of basketball.
Yeah. You mentioned David Stern, and it's funny, and I'll go back to Larry O'Brien because I'm not done there, because I do think he's very overlooked, as you mentioned, and you mentioned in the book. Because people think the NBA started when David Stern became the commissioner of basketball, I think, and it started well before him. Obviously, David Stern had a great contribution to the NBA and where it is today. But Larry O'Brien, as you said, put him into place, first of all. But at the time Larry O'Brien comes in, it's funny, I just put a comment up here from Carlos, thank you for joining us, Carlos and David and my dad, Bob, and Frankie. Good to see you. But Carlos, I was trying to find his comment here. Bear with me 1 second. He was talking about how I used to watch the NBA game on tape delays when I lived in Germany.
Yeah.
And I got thinking, I used to watch NBA championship games on tape delay here in the early 80s. That's where the NBA was at. You couldn't even get the games live in the 80s. And Larry O'Brien had a lot to do with changing that whole dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, Larry O'Brien, I think Larry O'Brien definitely gave the NBA gave the NBA a sense of gravitas. That's what it needed. It needed somebody who was going to get people to going to get the casual fan to take interest. Oh wow, Larry O'Brien! Wow, he's heading this organization now. But excuse me, the influence, the NBA on television and its influence. That's David Stern. That is all David Stern, especially on the international side. I mean, Larry. The thing about David Stern that was extremely that worked extremely well. That his partnership with Larry O'Brien worked really well for this reason, was that Larry O'Brien could sit back and just sort of be the face of the NBA, while David Stern did all the dirty work and got a 5-year apprenticeship to the commissioner job before he took it over in 1984. So David Stern was always the one talking to television executives. He was always the one talking to, the union folks. He was always the person that was looking at the international side of things. And that was something that David Stern really ratcheted up in the late 80s and early 1990s, that's discussed in the book. He saw the potential of the NBA worldwide, especially if you have games and highlights that feature international players. Like if you're watching an NBA game in Germany, and one game that you're going to get is like that Detlef game, or if you're in Croatia, like you're going to get Tony Kukoc games, because everyone and this is still the case to this day, everyone wants to see the hometown kid make good. That's going to be I don't think that's ever going to die as a storyline.
It's funny, the international players being integrated into the league almost feels like step 2 of the ABA merger, and all those great players coming into the league, right? And changing, as you said, the dynamic there. Let me ask you a question. Yeah. And it's impossible to answer, so it's probably not a fair question. But let's assume that the ABA and the NBA never merged. Would both of these leagues have gone out of business? What would have happened?
Oh,
it would not have been pretty, right?
They've gone out of business? That's a good question. The ABA definitely would have gone out of business. I mean, the ABA was when Dave DeBusschere came to Larry O'Brien in '75 with looking to have his teams folded into the NBA. The ABA was on life support. I mean, it had like 9 different commissioners in its 9-year history. The stadiums were half empty. I mean, the teams were hemorrhaging money. So I think the ABA definitely would have folded up shop. Probably like by 77 at the minimum. I mean, at the maximum, I should say.
Yeah.
The NBA,
I mean, would at least have been contracted, or might have only been half the teams. I think
the NBA would have been contracted. I think the NBA. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the NBA would have contracted. I think it would have been in the cities where the NBA had a foothold. So I think it would have been in Detroit. It would have been in New York, Los Angeles, the major market teams, or the teams that grew up that had basketball as part of its foundation. You know, New York. I mean, to me, when I think of New York, I think of basketball. I think LA basketball, Chicago, the cities that had basketball as part of its, for lack of a better term, socioeconomic framework.
Right.
They would have a team, but I think you would maybe have a 10-team league. You would maybe a 12-team league. It wouldn't be 32 teams now or 30 teams now with teams with a team in Canada and expansion talks as part of the discussion. Yeah, no way.
Yeah, I think when I ask that question, I think the team that always comes to my mind is Portland, because obviously they benefited from the merger as much as anybody. They won. I think it was the first championship after the merger. The Blazers won.
Yeah, 77.
By getting a bunch of guys from obviously from the ABA, including Maurice Lucas, who was probably the key guy.
Yeah.
But there's some other key players on that championship team too. And basketball in Portland was certainly probably on life support at that point in time. And then it became a huge thing after that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of television. And that's the beauty of not only television, but also promoting. And I discuss this in the book probably to death. But it's not only just television promoting the television being a way to promote the games and the teams, but also David Stern and NBA Entertainment, which was the league's highlight and video arm, promoting players, focusing on the players. So again, if you're going to watch the Portland Trailblazers, if you're a kid in the 1980s, not because of the Portland Trailblazers, but because they have Clyde Drexler, and you saw him on, you saw him being profiled on CBS at the NBA at the CBS at the NBA's halftime show, or maybe you watched him on NBA Superstars. So yeah, it wasn't just getting the players on board. I'm sorry, the games on board and getting them on prime time or getting them not tape delayed, but also getting the players recognized, getting the players out there, highlighting what the players could do. So yeah, I mean, and Bill Walton, I think, kind of missed that boat, but Clyde Drexler, I mean, as a kid, we talked earlier, I grew up in Jersey. Clyde Drexler was 3,000 miles away, but I know who he was. I knew who Terry Porter was. As I got older, I knew who Rod Strickland was and Cliff Robinson. And that's part of the NBA's promotional machinery, is making sure that you know who the players are, and not just who the teams, but knowing who the players are and what makes them special, and that gets you to watch the games. And
that really started with the ABA too, I think, because Dr. J was the first guy, the first personality. I think the NBA had a chance. There was other guys like Dr. J who didn't get the pub, right? But he was the big name in this whole merger. And CBS, and I'm thinking Larry O'Brien and his people made that decision to start promoting personalities and players, and probably the first league really to do it. Baseball to a certain extent. Football always had problems because you didn't see the players' faces and whatnot. But they were probably the first league, I think, to go headlong into that arena. Yeah, they had to, because they had to differentiate themselves from baseball and football. Yeah. Those sports, I'm talking primarily about the NFL and Major League Baseball, they had a strong foothold in America's sporting life, sporting conscious. They were fixated there, or rather, cemented there. The NBA didn't have that, and that's the thing about the NBA why it works to this day, is because it doesn't have a tradition.
The NBA doesn't have, baseball and football, they are rooted in tradition. Baseball, especially, I think baseball, which is a sport I still love, can't get out of its own way in regards to tradition.
But as a baseball fan, I get it, and I kind of fall into that. Bob Costas cranky old man syndrome.
Yeah, but the NBA, but the NBA, and this is under David Stern's watch, they made it a point not to be like baseball and football. So they were going to promote the players. They were going to turn the All-Star game into sort of a corporate marketing bonanza. They didn't really have any sacred cows. So they could just make the rules as they go along. I mean, to me, the bubble is the perfect example of that. It's just, all right, let's get a bubble up in Orlando and just have the teams play it out. There's no. The NBA is not beholden to anybody, and I think that's why, whenever I'm on Twitter, Fly Williams, wow, that's a name.
Right, Fly Williams.
With Twitter, there are a lot of people that I don't like today's game. I don't, the NBA today, but the NBA they are going to embrace change. They're going to go fully into whatever works, and that's why the NBA I think is very much a game for the kids, and that's always going to be the case.
You talked about the All-Star game and turning that into a showcase that the NBA didn't really have previously, and again they stole some elements from the ABA there as well. When you talk about the dunk contest and the 3-point shoot, I think the 3-point shot was the NBA's own creation, but they did incorporate obviously the 3-point shot into the game in the NBA. How important are those things to how the NBA moved forward?
Well, the All-Star game, the All-Star game weekend, which is now not really a weekend, but sort of a week, jamboree of of events and everything.
I mean, the game used to be played like on a Tuesday night, right?
Yeah, I mean,
nobody watched.
Yeah, Rick Welts, who is the president, who is the soon-to-be former president, COO of the Golden State Warriors. He was an NBA executive for years and years and years. He told me that the All-Star game used to be game, banquet, go home. That was it. You flew in, flew out. It was like a business trip. Now the All-Star game, it's an All-Star game week, and the All-Star game weekend. This is people. A bunch of sources told me this. The NBA All-Star game weekend or week, whatever you want to call it, that's the league's Super Bowl. That's the chance where it gets to shine. That's the chance where and not only does it allow a chance for all the great players to show up and serves as a showcase for them, but more important, it is a showcase for the NBA's advertising and corporate partners. It's a chance to wine them, dine them. It's a chance for the NBA's business partners to impress their clients and have them come in. And because the game is at one spot, and it's also an opportunity it's a relaxed atmosphere. It's not the finals. It's not the playoffs where the venue's going to change every 2 days or 3 days. It's a chance for players to it's a chance for everyone to kind of relax and just have fun. And it's a perfect social and business environment to kind of do their thing. But yeah, you mentioned the ABA. The ABA did All-Star game did their All-Star game right. And you mentioned, and this is in Terry Pluto's book, Loose Balls. The All-Star game was a big thing for them. They had they treated the players well. They paid them exceptionally well. It was an event, and in '76 the All-Star the last ABA All-Star game at halftime was a dunk contest, and the ABA the NBA, pardon me, took that and just tweaked it and turbocharged it in 1984, and that was a Carl Shearer invention All-Star game weekend with Rick Welch and David Stern and some folks. But yeah, the NBA that you see now, from a play standpoint and from a marketing standpoint, owes a giant debt to the ABA. And if you look at the folks that were if you look at the All-Star game weekend, who created that? Carl Shearer. I mean, or who played a role? That was Carl Shearer, who was the general manager of the Denver Nuggets, the ABA.
Yeah, it's funny. We talk about that, and I agree wholeheartedly that the All-Star game was huge in the development and the growth of the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the game in the 80s and the 90s, but I'll be very honest with you. And again, we'll talk a little bit, I guess, about the comparison of where your book leaves off and where the NBA is today. But I can't watch the game anymore.
Oh, it's terrible.
There's no reason to watch it.
It's terrible. No, you're right. It's not competitive.
They played to win before.
Yeah, it's now a pickup game. And again, I'll preface my statement, my opinion, by saying that I love today's NBA. I'm a fan. I've always entertained watching a game. There's a great swath of talent coming in, and that gets me excited. But the All-Star game now is just I can't watch it. But here's the thing: it's not meant for me and for you. It's not meant for a 43-year-old and a 61-year-old. The NBA All-Star Game week. Oh, thank you, Carlos. It is a really good book.
Well, listen, Carlos is the comment king, so I can't get them all up there. We'll talk about some of it because some of it's about today's game. So I want to kind of stay where we're at. So sorry.
Yeah, no problem. What was I going to say? The All-Star game. The All-Star game weekend. It's geared to kids. It's all the events, all the showcases, the 3-point contest, all those. The on-premise games and showcase highlights. It's geared toward kids. It's not geared toward middle-aged dudes.
Yeah,
and that's fine because the game. Look, and that's the thing about the NBA that I think they're so smart about is that if you are 12, 13, 14 and you're watching the game now, it is geared toward you. It is presented and packaged for the young fan, for the new fan. The idea is that, and this is just my opinion, the NBA I think operates under the premise of, you know what, we're going to try and get the new fans, the young fans, and once we get them, we'll have them for years. And I'm true to that. I mean, when I started getting in the NBA like 1990, 1991 with as I told you earlier, the Knicks and Pat Riley, but like NBA inside stuff like got me hooked. And like that, and that was geared. That was programmed directed specifically for kids. Like I mean, no bones about it. Like it is geared toward kids. Like that is your fix. Like that is the gateway drug. And now all the the goofy inside the NBA, which I think is a little goofy and fun and Twitter and all these things. That's geared toward young kids. Like NBA Twitter, that is geared toward that is the gateway drug, I think, to get kids hooked in the league, and and with the hope that they'll stay around for a while.
It's funny you mentioned they're not looking for 6-year-old guys like me, but I like the game, the regular season. We'll forget about the All-Star game now, but
yeah,
the regular season itself, the teams that are good. I've had this argument with some people. They go, I can't watch the game; it's all isolation and blah blah blah. I said, but if you watch some of the good teams, you watch those Warrior teams, that were on that run for 5 or 6 years with Steph Curry and Thompson and that crew. They move. If you watch closely, they move the basketball like the Knicks in the 70s.
Yeah.
But the end result was for an open 3-point shot, not for maybe a layup. So that's how the game changed. But there's still lots of ball movement and defense if you watch the games closely.
Absolutely.
Every team and not every player, obviously.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm glad you brought that up, Keith. I mean, that's watching those teams. I guess from 2015, like 2019, they were all about ball movement. They were all about using screens and getting to the open man. And they were fabulous teams to watch. And yeah, I mean, and that's you still have to find the open man. The principles of the game don't change. Yes, the players change and the style of play changes, but you still have to find the open person. You still have to put the ball in the hole. And there are elements. Look, I mean, the game is not the same that it was in the 80s or the 90s or even the early 2000s because of rule change. Because there have been so many rule changes that have been made to keep the game moving and high scoring, and that's fine. But there's also the problem. I'm sorry, but every time I watch an NBA game, there are elements that I adore, that I love. I mean, I was watching the Portland Denver game last night, And the one complaint is, oh, there's no low post play. Oh, have you seen Jokic play?
Yeah.
Like, he's very much like a big lumbering Kevin McHale type. Oh, there's no passing. Well, again, have you seen Jokic? Have you seen Chris Paul? Like, there are playmakers.
Even some of the big guys. I mean, look at Randall for the Knicks is a great passer. Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
When healthy, he's the best player in the NBA. The ball goes through him. He moves the ball around.
Exactly. So
he's not Carmelo Anthony, right, where he's a black hole.
Exactly. And I was never a Melo fan because, again, like he would just hold the ball on the wing for 18 seconds and just jack up a shot.
That's not fun to watch.
But that's just me. I'm not a Melo guy, but hey, look, if you love Melo, good for you. To me, every time I watch a game, there's always something that I enjoy, and it can be from just because at the end of the game, at the end of the day, you're not only are you watching, you're still watching, to my opinion, the best athletes in the world.
Yeah.
Play a game and be competitive, and that to me is never going to get old. And yes, I wish there was more of emphasis on the mid-range game. I wish there was more low post play, but I think it's a byproduct of my nostalgia for the NBA that I grew up watching. But I can watch any basketball game and find something to amuse me or entertain me or get me going. And that can be anything from, again, a great player. That could be from watching a great team move the ball around. That could be from just watching an individual player display athleticism that just is insane to me. But it could also be, the broadcast teams. It can be a really good sideline reporter. It could be anything. The game is. I cannot imagine, unless the game gets back to 1950s Fort Wayne, Minneapolis, 2019, where they're just holding the ball for 20 minutes. I can't imagine being bored by an NBA game.
Actually, I'll ask you this one question before we get off of today's game, because Carlos, I want to know if you have a prediction who will win the NBA title this year. I want to go back to the book, but I want to just, since we're on that topic, do you have a prediction for the winner this year?
It's funny. Someone asked me this like last week. I said the Jazz because I thought that they were the number one seed, but I also think that they're just ready. I think they have a good mixture of size and speed with Gobert and Mitchell and Clarkson, and they have really good outside shooting with Bogdanovich and Ingles, and Mitchell is a surprisingly effective 3-point shooter.
I think Snyder's a good coach too, myself.
Yeah, Snyder's a really good coach, and he's seasoned. I mean, he's been there for 7 years now.
Yeah.
They have home court advantage. I'm trying to think. I'm going to go with the Jazz. I mean, the Nets look great when I saw them a couple of nights ago, but my problem with the Nets is just they haven't been around. The chemistry is still so new.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think Durant, when he's on, is the best player in the NBA. I think he does a little bit of everything very, very well. He's a really good defender. He's a very good positional defender. But yeah, I still am a little unsold on Harden, Irving, and Durant working together for 48 minutes when they haven't been together for the whole season. That seems I can't quite buy that. What about you? What do you think?
I think it's wide open. I think I like Utah myself.
Yeah.
I'm a Knicks fan. I was hoping they could at least win a series, and things that unfortunately they played exactly the way they didn't play in the regular season in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that was the problem there. I won't get Carlos going because he'll want Thibodeau fired during the show.
Well, Thibodeau, I think they're a player away.
I do too.
They're a player away. Maybe, yeah. But yeah, I'm sorry. I like the Jazz too.
I think I'm going to stick with the Jazz, because I think Snyder's done a great job, and they got some great players that you mentioned. I won't dive back into that. And as we head back to the book, because I don't want to talk more about it, Carlos had asked, because he was saying he wanted to buy the book, is there a way to get an autographed book?
And thank you, Carlos.
That.
There's a couple of very easy ways to do it. First, if you go to Odyssey Books in Ithaca, Odyssey Bookstore in Ithaca is selling autographed copies, and for $5 extra, they'll mail the copy to you directly to Carlos or anyone who I think lives in the U.S. I'm not sure about internationally, but that's a whole different story. but yeah, that's I think that's $5 to actually get the book shipped to you, and I'll personally autograph it. I'm also more than happy to send an autographed book plate to anybody, and that's free of charge. So just if you buy the book and say, hey, I bought the book, send me an autographed book plate. I'm happy to do that. So yeah, there are many. I'm very as a first time author, I'm very amenable to autographs and plates and anything that'll get you to buy the book and get you to read it. Within reason, I will do. So yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. Let me jump back to the book a little bit. So
sure.
I mean, one place the jump off point for me has always been, and it's in your book, but you write about it less. It feels like, unless my memory is not serving me, you're not saying that, the Bird and Magic coming into the NBA wasn't huge, because it was, and you can talk about it. You don't talk, and I think more probably because the book's more behind the scenes than really on the court, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, that was a huge moment for the NBA, obviously. And what about, obviously, was that bigger than Michael, or is it equal in as far as impact?
That's a good question. Yeah, and you're right. With Bird and Magic, I didn't go too much into that, and there's a very simple reason for that. It's been written to death. It's been taught.
Oh no, I agree. Yeah,
and I didn't want someone who, I wanted to give a perspective for someone who maybe isn't an NBA fan about their value, but I also wanted someone like Carlos or any NBA fan. I didn't want to bog them down in the same points, the same narrative. Again, there have been so many books written about that. So, there was a great HBO documentary, I think Courtship of Rivals, about that. So I didn't want to go into the same old thing. But it was definitely more important than Jordan. Here's why. Because with Magic and Bird, that gave the NBA a narrative that it could sell to TV executives, to CBS, but also to fans. And it was an easy narrative. It was one player's black, one player's white, one player, their team is on the West Coast, one's on the East Coast. And so it was very easy to sell that. And also you had two very different personality types. You had Magic, who was glitz and glamour and very LA, and Bird, who was very, bring my lunch pail and blue collar type. And the other thing about that I think is overlooked is that for not only were these players stars, but they were team first oriented stars. So the classic old school NBA fans could be like, yeah, you know what, like could celebrate their team first abilities, but they were flashy enough where new fans were like, oh wow, that Magic Johnson pass, that was crazy. Like, look at Larry Bird shoot that like fadeaway 3-pointer from the corner.
Yeah.
They had that mix of new and old that traditionalists could get behind, but also new fans could embrace. So Bird and Magic set the scene for Jordan, because he built the platform for them to. He built the power for Michael, pardon me, to do his stuff. And before then too, Dr. J. So I think the Bird Magic rivalry was perfect for the few reasons, but mostly just for television, because it was a way to, you could also package that as an advertiser, but you could also it also brought together the coasts. TV executives are always talking about, oh, we need big markets, widespread. What are too big? But Boston's a huge market, and so is LA, and they're 3,000 miles apart.
It's interesting how those two great players and such important players made their ways to those two markets.
I know. Yeah,
that's probably a whole show to talk about.
Exactly. But, it's funny you mentioned that. People always talk about People always talk about the. I sound like a politician. But one of the things that's always discussed from NBA fans is the whole frozen envelope thing, the whole frozen envelope lottery in '85 with the Knicks to get Patrick Ewing.
Or the folded corner or whatever, whichever.
Yeah.
Subscribe to, right?
But it's funny. I don't in my talks, no one ever said, "Hey, you know what, Pete? Like, you should look into the '79 draft, because that was a real." Also, I'm trying to remember. I think Bird was chosen as a junior eligible in '78
by the Celtics, right?
Yeah, so
it was a strange rule, right? I think they signed him before the draft or something. The next draft.
Yeah, so it was a whole. Yeah, so I don't know, but that's just again one of those lucky things. But also remember, this is in Jeff Problin's great book Showtime. The Lakers were also very much considering sitting Moncrief in that role as a draft pick. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
But I doubt we would have had the great Laker teams with Sidney Moncrief.
No, it wouldn't have been the same. He was a great player, though, and he's a deserved Hall of Famer.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I don't mean to demean him at all. I really don't. Just a different style of play. Listen, when it comes to Jordan, too, I mean, obviously Bird and Magic have that dynamic that you mentioned. It's like you said, it's an easy narrative.
Yeah.
But Jordan comes in and he's just, a different – nobody – I mean, Dr. J's the only guy I could compare him to at that point in time anyway. But he also, now we have Nike involved in the whole NBA thing, which is huge. I mean, that just brings a whole new, again, I keep using the word dynamic, but a whole new dynamic to the NBA again. As far as exposure.
No, I mean, with Jordan too, that's also the birth of, with the NBA. I mean, that really brings the marketing of the individual to a whole new level, because that was Jordan from the start. Jordan was marketed and portrayed as an individual. I mean, there's David Falk, Michael Jordan's agent.
Yeah.
He was talking to folks at Nike about Jordan, his value, and I think it was Rob Strasser, who was a executive at Nike, one of the influential figures there. Was talking to Falk about him. It's like, it sounds like you want to market him as a tennis player. And David Falk is like, that's exactly what I want to do. And that was the birth of, again, that was the, I'm not gonna say the birth of the NBA marketing, or rather an NBA player being marketed as an individual, but it brought credence to that big time. And you mentioned before about Magic and Bird, how lucky that was. That was all luck with Jordan. Because it was Mikey identifying, okay, this is who we should maybe redirect our marketing around. This is who we should this is who we should put a lot of our interest in with a signature shoe. It was also Jordan being extremely marketing savvy, very, very marketing savvy.
Yeah,
and it was also Jordan being such a great player. The Air Jordan doesn't work if Jordan is only good, or Jordan is pretty good, not great, if he's Sidney Moncrief. But Jordan, being the explosive talent that he was, being the evolutionary Dr. J, that set the tone for where we are now, where an individual player getting a signature shoe deal out of the gate is not a big deal, where the shoe money is such a big part of it. So with Jordan, his influence as a player, especially on the worldwide scene, can't be overlooked. But I think what's really important is just how he changed the narrative with NBA players being business entities. And I mean, he was just, and the thing with Jordan is that he knew that right out the gate. And he is, I think, one of probably the most media savvy athlete, if not in my lifetime, then perhaps in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I mean, from a media standpoint, I think there's Jordan and Ali, and I can't think of the third guy that fits with him right now off the top of my head.
I don't know either. I mean, maybe LeBron is someone who knows how to use the media and use his platform to get his points across. But Michael Jordan was someone who knew.
Yeah, well, Michael was apolitical, though. He didn't get into the stuff that people don't like LeBron.
No, I mean, I would put LeBron, and I think Ali is the same thing. I think Ali understood his ability as an orator, excuse me, and as someone who could bring a spotlight to larger issues. But Michael Jordan was somebody who knew his value, knew the value of, as you put it, staying apolitical.
Yeah.
Being someone who just, was able to just give the people what they wanted at that time. And again, you look at the 80s, there was a lot of exhaustion.
Carlos mentions Tiger. I'm not sure about Tiger, but
Tiger. I mean, to me, Tiger was always a robot who played golf really well.
yeah.
I think Tiger. I don't think
personality. He doesn't have the personality others
have it.
Yeah.
No, and Michael knew how to give the personality without giving you the things that made you uncomfortable. That's the thing. I think he understood that situation exceptionally well. Tiger to me was just a robot playing golf. I never looked at Tiger Woods like, oh man, that's a guy I want to have dinner with. That's a guy. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned, I judge. My wife laughs at me. I think I must tell this to every guest, and my viewers are probably getting sick of hearing this story. But people, athletes, and even actors, I guess, people I don't know, I judge them by whether I'd want to sit down and have a beer with them at a bar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't see myself sitting having a beer with Tiger. I'd love to have a beer with Michael.
Yeah. Well, that was the value of Michael Jordan, is that he presented himself. Whether it was by, I think he knew this, his average, and that's what made him such an appealing spokesperson, was that he was a blank slate. You can assign what you want to Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, if you're, is a guy I want to have a beer with. For a 12-year-old kid, Michael Jordan is someone I idolize, because look at his kick-ass shoes. Look at him fly through the air. I
want to have a beer with him when I was 12, I think.
Well, there you go. If you're a teenager or a young adult, Michael Jordan is an iconoclast because he's wearing shoes that no one else is wearing.
Yeah.
So if you're a grandmother or grandfather, oh, Michael Jordan, he's such a nice young man. Look at him with that little kid in those Nike commercials, Spike Lee. Michael Jordan was a blank slate, and you could assign whatever you wanted to him. That made him such an invaluable tool for the NBA, and someone who I think David Stern probably thanked his lucky stars for every day, because he was such a great player, and he was such a force of nature and a competitor, but he was also somebody who could sell any product. You could sell Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan could tell you anything. I mean, there's a funny bit on when he hosted SNL in 91 about the things that he wouldn't about products that didn't quite make the cut that he would advertise. And I think one of them was for I think it was for like feminine pads or something.
Yeah.
So it's just, that was the beauty of Michael Jordan. He was somebody who just was somebody who could just tell you anything and back it up, because he was a great player, but he was magnanimous in a way that was opaque. Yeah.
It's funny too. And we talk about Michael, and we talk about the international, the influx of international players. And I think they go a lot hand in hand, because I think he was a worldwide brand. He wasn't a United States brand. And that's what really, expanded the reach of professional basketball. And these guys were playing some pretty good basketball in Europe.
Yeah.
And when the Dream Team came along and everything else, I think that really, geez, the NBA's got to be a third foreign players, I got to believe.
Yeah.
I don't know a number, but I'm guessing.
It used to be, when I was a kid, that if a team drafted a player from Europe or from an international player, that it was just your first thought was, oh no, like, oh great, this guy's gonna stink. And now
they drafted about 12 of them.
Yeah. Well, for the Knicks with Frederick Weiss and
that's the name I was trying to think of.
Yeah, there you go. Now that's not the case anymore. There are, if you were to name the 10 best players of the NBA right now, I would suspect that at least 5 of them are international players.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
But the Dream Team opened that up, and again, Jack McCallum wrote a great book about the Dream Team, and also about a little bit about its impact after the fact. But the Dream Team opened up a lot of people's eyes to basketball. I mean, Tony Parker and Dirk Nowitzki are two players.
Oh, what'd I do?
Oh, here.
Sorry, popped out of the room there for a second.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. If I was saying, Dirk Nowitzki and Tony Parker are two players who have admitted that the Dream Team opened up their world to basketball. And again, the Dream Team is, again, everyone wants is the Olympics. So that was a perfect platform for the NBA to plant international seeds. But they were doing that before the Dream Team. The Dream Team was a culmination of those international efforts. And you mentioned before the highlights. That was one thing the NBA did, was not only did they, on the international side, they weren't just going to send you games overseas. They were going to send you highlights. They were going to send you shows that showed all those great plays, that showed you the players, that showed you that gave you the main course of the NBA, not just a 48-minute game. And the Dream Team, the '92 Olympics, that's when it exploded. But those seeds were planted years before.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly been important. I mean, in your book, before we have to wrap up, unfortunately, we could go forever. I mean, it had so much I wanted to cover. Your book covers so much information, Pete. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Is there anything that there's a bunch we didn't touch on. Anything that you feel is important that we need to throw out there before we do wrap up today?
No, I appreciate that. I'm trying to think. To me, the book. I'll say this, and I've said this a few times. I think. To me, the book, I think the book is important, or is a must-read for NBA fans today, because it shows how the NBA got to where it is. Yeah. I think there's a tendency, and again, I was the same way as a kid. You turn on the TV now, and the NBA that you see is the NBA that you think has always been there. Oh, the NBA has always had, has always been on 3 times a week, and it's always a presence on the sports page or now online, and that isn't the case. To me, I want to write a book that showed how the NBA got to be where it was. But I also wanted to. Thank you, Carlos. I also wanted to show that the NBA isn't just what was more than just Larry, Magic, Bird, and David Stern. That there were a number of people behind the scenes who turned the NBA into this global enterprise. And it's not just those 3 guys. It's also folks like Bill Marshall and Ted Shaker at CBS Sports, and all the people at NBA Entertainment. Don Sperling and David Gavin, all these men and women that made the NBA go. Barry Winnick, Leah Wilcox. I mean, there are so many people that made the NBA into the enterprise that it is today, and I wanted to give those people a little bit of the spotlight, because again, you can read many books on Bird, Magic, Jordan. As far as I know, there hasn't been a great David Stern biography written. But
there's your next project.
I don't know, maybe. But to me, there are a lot of people that need to be shown for their contributions, and I think this book showed their value, including Larry O'Brien. So there you go.
Well, you did a great job. I love behind the scenes stuff like this, and you could, like you said, you can find a plethora of books about stuff that happened on the court, and individual guys, and blah blah blah. You did a great job here. Exhaustive research, obviously, over 300 interviews you did on this, all listed in the book. You talked to some of my favorite authors, by the way. Harvey Ayrton, I've had on the show, great author, and When the Garden Was Eaten is was probably the first basketball book I can remember reading as a younger person. Mm-hmm. Great book about the Knicks and the 70s Knicks. Fred Mitchell, one of my favorite, not as well known maybe nationally as some of the other guys, but great guy, had him on the show. So you had some great people that you interviewed for this book, and I congratulate you. I wish you all the success in the world. Send me anything, if the stuff that we talked about for Carlos, if you can send me some information, I'll get it posted to my
absolutely page. Absolutely.
Anything I can do to help promote the book besides this interview, we'll do it.
Keith, I appreciate that. No, it was great to be on here, and I'll send you over that information. yeah, with all the bells and whistles. But yeah, I'm happy to again, if anyone wants an autographed copy or a signed book plate, or I'm actually doing a giveaway with an NBA themed mug. That's a whole other story. But yeah, I'm happy to send that your way, and I appreciate all the support. Thank you.
Do you have a new project you're working on?
Yeah, there is something. I do have an idea for a book. I'm in the very embryonic stages of writing a proposal for it. What I can say is that if all goes according to plan, again, you never know. I mean, with these things,
right.
If all goes according to plan, it'll be a sequel in spirit to the book that's behind me right now. So yeah, but we'll see how that goes. I'm very excited about it. We'll see if it takes off. If not, I'm very happy. With what I'm doing now, with all the writing, and I'm thrilled to have written this book. So it's all gravy. It's all gravy from here.
Excellent. You do that, we'll have you back on. We may have you back on anyway because we got more to talk about. Even maybe some of the articles that you're getting in some other publications. So I thank you for coming on. If you want to hang around for a minute, I'm going to wrap up the show. If you got to go, I understand. But I do thank you for being on today. And if you want to stick around, I'll be back in a couple of seconds.
Sure, I'll hang up. Thanks, Keith.
All right. Thanks. Bye. So my guest, Pete Croatto, today. What a great book. Honestly, got a great interview, too. Pete's obviously very knowledgeable. He did a lot of work, as you can tell, or you can probably tell from the interview, and you will be able to tell if you read this book. And if you like behind-the-scenes stuff and not just your cookie-cutter, sports books, we've all read them. This is the one to get. And I thank Pete so much for that. We'll get some information on the TGI Sports Talk website, as I mentioned. And that's going to be it for today, guys. I'm going to wrap it up, and we're going to see you Sunday morning with our Stream of Consciousness chat. We got a lot to talk about: the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball, Coach K announcing his last year coming up. So much to cover. Join us 9 a.m. Sunday. We'll talk more about our guests for next Friday. We're still working on some logistics there. But again, thanks to Pete Croatto. And get this book, guys. It is called Hang Time from Prime Time. I'm sorry, from Hang Time to Prime Time. Good grief. Business and Entertainment in the Birth of Modern NBA. Get it? Thanks to Pete today. We'll see you guys Sunday. Have a great Friday, guys. Enjoy. Keith Engel from TGI Sports Talk right here on Northeast Streaming Sports.